Here are the 10 real places where Jesus lived and what they were actually like, including images showing where they are today. After watching this, you'll never see the life of Jesus in the same way again. 2 of these locations might challenge everything you've previously heard about his birth and childhood. The first place where Jesus lived definitely didn't have wooden stables like the ones often shown at Christmas. Luke 2 verse 7 mentions a manger, and that's because Jewish houses at the time had a specific design. The family lived upstairs, and in the winter, their animals were kept downstairs for warmth. So Mary gave birth on the ground floor of a typical home, where there was a carved stone trough used to feed the family's cattle. This wasn't extreme poverty, but just regular life during that period. Bethlehem back then was a small shepherding community. Micah 5 verse 2 describes it as little among the thousands of Judah. The town was surrounded by open fields, where shepherds would watch over their flocks at night, as recorded in Luke 2 verse 8. Bethlehem today is a modern Palestinian city. The Basilica of the Nativity, which was built in 339 AD, is the dominant feature of the old city center. Visitors can go down into the Grotto of the Nativity through a very low doorway called the Door of Humility. There, a silver star marks the traditional location of the birth. The change is remarkable. The open fields have turned into densely packed urban blocks. Where shepherds once roamed freely, walls and checkpoints now divide the landscape. However, the surrounding hills still have the same olive trees and vineyards that Mary and Joseph would have recognized. The second place reveals a childhood that's likely very different from what most people imagine. Nazareth was so insignificant that Nathanael once asked, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" John 1 verse 46. This question shows how the village was looked down upon in the region. Archaeological digs have confirmed that in the 1st century, Nazareth was an extremely small place. The homes were basically natural caves that had been expanded with white limestone walls at the front. Jesus literally grew up in a cave house. The village was built on a single rocky hillside. The kids explored the caves, the women got water from hand-carved cisterns, and daily life revolved around subsistence farming and goat herding. Nazareth today is the largest Arab city in Israel. The Basilica of the Annunciation, which was finished in 1969, is the biggest church in the Middle East. Its modern structure stands above excavations that have preserved what's left of the original village. Urban expansion has completely changed entire hillsides. Paved streets have replaced dirt paths, and apartments now go up slopes that were once only accessible to goats. But underneath the modern basilica, archaeologists have preserved the foundations of 1st century houses, ancient cisterns that still work, and stone ovens where families cooked their food. From the ridge in Nazareth, Jesus could see the Jezreel Valley, one of the most fertile regions on earth. The golden fields of grain stretched all the way to the horizon. Today, that same view includes communication towers and paved roads. Tractors work the land where ox-drawn plows once moved. The valley is still very productive, but the methods have changed dramatically. Automated irrigation has replaced rainfall, and hybrid wheat grows where primitive grains once stood. Recent excavations have uncovered olive presses and wine vats from the Roman era, which confirms that Nazareth's economy included agricultural processing, not just survival farming. From these very humble beginnings, Jesus would move on to cosmopolitan cities and sacred waters, places that would witness the start of his divine mission. The third place where Jesus lived was Capernaum, as recorded in Matthew 4 verse 13. Leaving Nazareth, he went and lived in Capernaum. This wasn't just a short visit, but a permanent move. Capernaum was located on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee, at the intersection of major trade routes. It was a busy fishing and customs town, where Jesus called Matthew the tax collector, Matthew 9 verse 9. The buildings were made of black basalt, which stood in contrast to the imported white limestone used for the synagogue. Families lived in clusters around shared courtyards. The house identified as Peter's home is only about 100 feet from the synagogue where Jesus taught. Mark 2 verse 1 says that when Jesus was at home, crowds gathered until there was no space left. This was the real headquarters of his ministry. Capernaum today is a protected archaeological park. The synagogue that you see dates back to the 4th century, but it was built directly on top of the foundations of the very synagogue where Jesus preached. Original stones have been preserved underneath. Where there once was a vibrant port city, all that remains are basalt ruins. Palm trees now frame what used to be busy streets and harbors filled with fishing boats. The fourth place witnessed the event that officially launched his public ministry. The Jordan River has a unique geography. It starts about 1,800 feet above sea level and then drops to about 1,300 feet below, creating the lowest valley on Earth. This dramatic landscape influenced John the Baptist's choice of location, near Jericho, at a site called Bethany beyond the Jordan, John 1 verse 28. It was a natural crossing point for pilgrims traveling up to Jerusalem, which maximized his audience. Jesus was baptized where the river bends and gets deeper. Matthew 3 verse 16 records, "The heavens were opened to him." It was a moment of public revelation of the Trinity, witnessed by many. Back then, the banks were lush and wild, with palms and reeds providing shade and privacy. But today, the Jordan faces serious environmental issues. The water flow has been significantly reduced because of dams upstream. Where there was once a powerful river, now a narrow stream trickles. The traditional baptism site, Caesarea Philippi, is now a fenced-off archaeological reserve. Pilgrims walk down concrete steps to floating docks for ceremonies that are held daily. The wilderness has been replaced by manicured gardens and multilingual signs. Further north, Yardenit offers a modern, commercialized baptism experience with marble steps, gift shops, and facilities for large groups. The quiet solitude of John's time has turned into a constant buzz of organized tourism. Yet, one thing hasn't changed. The same water still flows in the same direction, toward the Dead Sea, carrying sediments from the mountains where everything began. From these transforming waters, Jesus would move to the mountains where he revealed truths that forever changed our understanding of his divine identity. The fifth place, Caesarea Philippi, has a meaning that few people recognize. It was located at the foot of Mount Hermon, where the Jordan's main springs originate. This wasn't a random choice, it was deliberate. In the 1st century, the city was a pagan center dedicated to the god Pan. A natural cave that gushed with clear water was believed to be the gateway to the underworld. Herod Philip built marble temples around it. Against this backdrop of pagan imagery, Jesus asked the critical question. Matthew 16 verse 15 records, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." That confession was made literally in front of shrines to false deities. Caesarea Philippi today is Bania's National Park, where the same springs still burst with ancient force. The Roman temples have vanished, their foundations buried under greenery. Signs mark where altars once stood, and metal walkways lead visitors to the sacred cave, which is now a geological attraction. The 6th place offers the most breathtaking view in the entire Holy Land. The Mount of Olives, which rises about 2,700 feet above sea level, faces Jerusalem from the east. Luke 21 verse 37 notes that Jesus spent the night there. During the Second Temple era, the mount was covered with olive groves that were centuries old, with trunks so massive that several men couldn't wrap their arms around them. From this height, Jesus looked upon Herod's temple, its golden stones shining in the sunrise, its courts filled with worshippers, and smoke from sacrifices constantly rising to heaven. Here, he delivered his prophetic discourse about Jerusalem's destruction and the signs of the end, Matthew 24. Luke 19 verse 41 records that Jesus wept over the city, and his tears fell on the same soil that has absorbed both joy and sorrow for thousands of years. Today, the panorama is still stunning, but completely transformed. Where Jesus once saw the Golden Temple, now the Dome of the Rock glitters. Where ancient walls once stood, modern Jerusalem rises with skyscrapers. Thousands of white tombs now shine where silver leaves once shimmered in the wind, a vast urban necropolis replacing fertile groves. Yet, some remnants survive. Scientists have confirmed that 8 olive trees in Gethsemane are over 900 years old, their roots reaching the same soil that nourished trees from Jesus' time. The Kidron Valley still follows its original shape, and Jesus once crossed it, climbing the steep slope toward the holy city. Where he prayed in total darkness, artificial lights now illuminate the gardens, the intimacy of night replaced by constant visibility. From these contemplative heights, Jesus descended to valleys where he would experience the deepest expressions of human emotion. The 7th place was Bethany, a village 2 miles from Jerusalem, John 11. It was his personal refuge, where he could just be human, away from the crowds and pressures of ministry. In the 1st century, Bethany was a small farming community on the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives. John 11 verse 1 identifies it as the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Families made a living from agriculture and livestock. Their homes had a main room with bread ovens, small bedrooms, and underground cisterns for rainwater. John 11 verse 5 says plainly, Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. It was a genuine family bond, not just formal hospitality. Here, the most detailed resurrection miracle occurred. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days, buried in a rock-sealed cave. Bethany today, called Caesarea, the place of Lazarus, has grown far beyond its ancient boundaries. Modern buildings cover the hills that were once lined with terraces. Visitors descend 24 steps into the traditional tomb of Lazarus, a dark, narrow chamber, exactly like the burial caves of that time. Ruins of a Byzantine church mark the supposed home of Martha and Mary, and preserved mosaics show early Christian symbols. Where there once was a quiet agricultural village, now a bustling Palestinian town thrives. Modern borders make travel between Bethany and Jerusalem complicated. Yet the message remains: if you believe that Jesus still transforms impossible situations as he did for Lazarus, write in the comments, Jesus is the resurrection and the life. The 8th place showcases ancient engineering that still amazes experts: Jericho. Its irrigation system was far more advanced than anything else at the time, with aqueducts channeling spring water through rock-cut canals, which allowed farming to happen in desert soil. Ancient Jericho stood at Tel Sultan, a mound built up by thousands of years of human settlement, surrounded by defensive walls that protected a population that depended on controlled water flow. Herod the Great built his winter palace here, taking advantage of the tropical climate that exists almost 800 feet below sea level. The gardens flourished thanks to sophisticated hydraulic design. Jesus passed through Jericho, often on his way to Jerusalem. Luke 19 verse 1 says he entered Jericho and met Zacchaeus, and Mark 10 verse 46 records the healing of blind Bartimaeus on the dusty road leading out of the city. Today, Jericho is a Palestinian city that's officially recognized as the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. Tel Sultan is an archaeological park where you can see layers of civilizations. Ruins of Herod's palace remain, including mosaic floors, pools, and gardens that once symbolized royal luxury. The climate is still tropical, but the vegetation has changed. Where irrigated orchards once thrived, desert plants now dominate. And where Jesus once climbed the steep trail toward Jerusalem, a multi-lane highway now carries cars along the same mountain route. The 9th place marks a moment of extreme humanity, Gethsemane, at the foot of the Mount of Olives. In Aramaic, Gethsemane means oil press. It was an olive grove where olives were crushed to extract oil for trade. John 18 verse 2 confirms that Jesus often met there with his disciples. It was a private, walled garden, an intimate space for prayer away from the crowds. On the night of his passion, peace turned into anguish. Mark 14 verse 33 describes a paralyzing dread. Luke 22 verse 44 records that his sweat became like drops of blood, a condition known as hematidrosis, which is caused by extreme emotional stress. His prayer, "Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me," was repeated 3 times, Matthew 26 verse 39, which reveals the full depth of his humanity. Gethsemane today is drastically changed, yet it still holds living witnesses of that night. The Basilica of Agony, 1924, shelters the rock where Jesus prayed. 8 ancient olive trees continue to grow in the same soil. Experts have confirmed that their roots descend from trees that were alive in Jesus' time. The once open garden is now enclosed by high walls and iron gates, with visiting hours and organized tours replacing the solitude of prayer. The 10th place divided human history into before and after Christ. Golgotha, the place of the skull, was located outside the 1st century city walls, a limestone hill used for Roman executions, positioned along a busy road to maximize public impact. Crucifixion was meant to be a spectacle of terror. John 19 verse 17 says that Jesus, carrying his own cross, went out to the place called Calvary. The Via Dolorosa wound upward from the Antonia fortress through narrow stone streets that had been polished by countless footsteps. Golgotha's bare white rock looked like a human skull under the blazing sun. Luke 23 verse 33 records simply, "There they crucified him." Between 2 criminals, Jesus was nailed to the standard Roman cross. And on Sunday morning, women found the tomb open and empty, Luke 24 verse 3. The resurrection happened in a real geographic place, not in some spiritual abstraction. Today, Golgotha and the tomb of Christ are enclosed within the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which was originally built under Emperor Constantine. It remains one of the most contested sacred sites on earth, shared by 6 Christian denominations: Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Armenian, Coptic, Syriac, and Ethiopian. Each denomination controls specific areas. The traditional site of the crucifixion is upstairs, beneath a silver star that marks where the cross once stood. Pilgrims touch the metal that covers the original rock, which is still visible underneath. The tomb itself lies under the Great Rotunda, inside the edicule, a marble chamber that was recently restored. Endless lines of visitors wait to enter. Of the 10 earthly places where Jesus lived and walked, this final one is the only place that refuses to remain final, because the one who rose from this tomb promised to return. And when that happens, the sites we preserve as memories will once again become living realities. Now, click the video on your screen to discover how the first humans of history lived, hunted, and survived. Click now.